Every year, you look at the AP Top 25 when the season getting ready to go, and there are teams that everybody thinks are overrated, underrated, whatever the case may be. And then you get the teams that sometimes are consistently overrated. I live in the Midwest, so to a lot of people, it's Notre Dame. That's the team that is constantly viewed as, holy cow, how in the hell is Notre Dame ranked in the top 5, top 10, top 15? Again, how does this continue to happen? And that's the perception, is that there are schools like that, or that Texas, this is the year Texas is going to be back, or this is the year the U is going to be back. And then that we have that discussion again later on down the line. Well, somebody actually crunched the numbers to see who is continually overrated, who kind of year in, year out fits the bill of, like, hey, yeah, you are legitimately overranked. And this is all going back to 2014. So I'm going to show you, if you're watching on YouTube, I'll show you the list. If you're listening on the podcast, I'll read the list down for you. The most overrated football teams based on preseason rankings. The number 1 slot is to Auburn. The Auburn Tigers are the most overranked team since 2014. USC is number 2. Wisconsin, number 3. Texas A&M, number 4. Number 5 is LSU. Number 6 is Texas. Number 7, Oregon. 8, Oklahoma. Miami is number 9. And Florida State is number 10. You don't see Notre Dame on that list. And to tell you the truth, I'm not completely shocked that Auburn is the team that's on top. And part of that is simply because we have gotten to the point where the SEC is so, and I think you have to choose your next words carefully. The SEC is so venerated, probably not the word I want to use, but there are so many teams in the SEC that are ranked in the preseason top 25 year after year after year. That is it 12? Maybe 9 of the top 25 teams this year in the preseason poll were ranked from the SEC. Now that's a lot. It's undeniably a lot of people, or a lot of teams. So when you're ranking that many teams from one conference, the chances and the likelihood that those teams are all going to remain in the top 25, that they're all going to have records that are good enough to be viewed as synced up with what they were in the preseason, is just not realistic. So you look at the list and going on now, Auburn is number 1 in the SEC. Texas A&M is number 4 in the SEC. LSU is number 5, SEC. Texas, number 6, SEC. Oklahoma, number 8, SEC. So that there's a correlation there of being overranked and then not being able to fit that bill, because just by kind of virtue of the way the schedule breaks out, the way that you're going to play maybe a little tougher schedule than other teams and other conferences are, you're not going to be able to fit that bill. But the SEC is not alone in that. If you take a look at the rest of the top 10, at today's conference affiliation, USC is number 2, Big 10. Wisconsin, Big 10, number 3. Oregon, Big 10, number 7. It's both a blessing and a curse, right? Because like the more teams you have ranked in the top 25, obviously the more likely it is that those teams might not be as good as we thought they were, or finish with records that put them to where we thought they were earlier. Like there's a direct correlation there. So I'm not necessarily 100% shocked by that. I guess I am slightly surprised that Notre Dame doesn't crack the top 10 in that list. That when you get to past that, the teams that are overrated, Clemson is number 11, Stanford is number 12, Michigan State 13, Georgia 14, UCLA 15, 16 South Carolina, 17 Alabama, and tied for 17th is Notre Dame. So they're really not as overranked as you think they are. Now, have they gotten to the sport's grandest stage at times and fallen on their face? Yes. If you're going back to 2014, you're not counting the 2012 national championship game, but Notre Dame has made the college football playoff and has not advanced to the college football playoff national championship game. So you get that kind of perception. And I think it's important sometimes to really look at whether perception is reality, right? I remember this vividly. At one point, when Colin Cowherd was on ESPN radio, the NBA All-Star game was about to be in New Orleans. And he was going on this tangent about how NBA players don't want to go to New Orleans for the All-Star game, which feels like poppycock, because like if you've ever been in New Orleans, good time. But he was going on and on about how NBA players don't want to go to New Orleans for the All-Star game because crime's so bad. It's a dump. Like, does it kind of smell like piss? Yes. But it's a dump. Crime's so bad. There's no real high-end restaurants, which is ignorance. And the mayor of New Orleans calls into his show and goes through all of these statistics about, like, you know, we have world-class restaurants. We have, you know, 5-star restaurants. We have 5-star hotels. Compared to other major cities in the United States, our crime rate is super low. And without missing a beat, Colin Cowherd says, perception's reality. And kind of ever since that moment, because it is like, that is an uncomeback-withable line, right? Like, if you say, hey, perception is reality, Notre Dame is overranked every year, and then you get to look at that list and go like, oh, well, actually there are 17 other programs that are more overranked than they are over the course of the last decade. Does that change your perception? Probably not, because if you look at the AP Top 25 poll, and if Notre Dame somehow loses to Miami of Ohio, your perception is not going to be, well, you know what? Actually, they were appropriately ranked. Give them time to get to the end of the season, and they might be able. No, it's like, they suck. That's your immediate reaction. And so when you get that perception challenge, I always think it's interesting to take a deeper look at that. And kudos to Brett McMurphy from the Action Network for running through those. Hey, who are the most overrated? And at the same time, they did the most underrated, and not like by perception, by statistics, who are the most underrated teams. And I think, as unsurprising as it is that there are big time brands right on this list of Auburn, USC, Wisconsin, A&M, LSU, Texas, Oregon, Oklahoma, Miami, Florida State, the teams that are underrated are Northwestern, Cincinnati, TCU, Missouri, Kentucky, Central Florida, Arizona, Houston, Oklahoma State. I don't think it's a coincidence that those are the brands, those are the teams, the programs that are underrated, because the word I just used there, brands, matters in college football. And I don't know, I think the expanded college football playoff helps that, right? Because you get more opportunities for teams that might not get the benefit of the doubt. Central Florida is not going to get the benefit of the doubt versus Florida, versus Florida State, versus Miami. In perception. On the field, it doesn't matter what the perception is. And Northwestern's not going to get the benefit of the doubt over Oklahoma. But brands matter. And until we figure out a way to make them not matter, and I think the 12-team playoff does that, they're going to matter. But you see in the list of, hey, when you look at, of the top 20 brands in college football, how many are represented on the list of overrated teams? USC, LSU, Texas, Oregon, Oklahoma, Miami, Florida State. Auburn is right on that list. Wisconsin might not be on the list of top 20 brands, but they're pretty darn close. I don't think it's outlandish to point out, like, maybe we should stop caring about like what the uniforms look like or what logos on the side of the helmet and start caring about how good the football team is when you go to rank who are 1 through 25. And that's not just for the AP poll. That's not just for the coaches poll. It's for the college football playoff committee too. Instead of scouting the helmet, start scouting the players, start scouting the teams, figuring out who's real good at this and who might be slightly overrated. I thought that was an interesting look at who's overrated each year, year in, year out. Want to know your thoughts? Do you feel like Auburn is overrated every year? Do you feel like USC and Wisconsin are overrated every year? Texas A&M? I think I've heard Texas A&M be viewed as like, hey, these guys are overrated. LSU, Texas, what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments down below. Love reading them. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. Here on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you are listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.